First Nation and Native American Reservation Sightings, Part 13. The Yurok Indian Devils. Back in 2009, Dave Pilates introduced me to the writings of author Lucy Thompson. In 1991, she published her book, To the American Indian, Reminiscences of a Yurok Woman. It was an inspirational reading that touched on the kidnapping of a woman by Indian devils. Lucy Thompson was a pure, full-blooded Northern California Klamath River Indian woman who wore the tattoos on her chin deemed customary for the women of her esteemed high birth. I thought her chapter on abduction gave us a unique insider's view of that culture. There was this noteworthy excerpt from Thompson's book. In olden times, the women especially were always careful to keep together on their camping trips when they were gathering the acorn crops, grass seeds, and pine nuts for fear of these Indian devils. The Indian devils would sometimes watch the camps of the Indians very closely and follow them about as they moved from place to place, watching for an opportunity to seize one of the young women and carry her off to make her his wife. If a young woman strayed away too far by herself, she was often made a captive by one of these devils. The women of the tribe had a great fear of them as they held great horror of becoming the wife of a wild man. Sometimes the women would be captured by the Indian devils and would be gone away from their tribe for years, and then they would return and tell of their wild life and experiences. They would become the mother of children, and the children would inherit the wild habits of their father, as they would always be whistling, making strange noises, romping wildly about, and always on the go, roaming everywhere in the wilds. These women were never happy when they came back to their devil husbands and children. When the Indians would go on their hunting and camping trips into the mountains, as soon as they heard an owl screech or hoot, they would stop and listen and try to distinguish if it was an Indian devil imitating the owl or the cry of a wild animal. The Indians would stop at once, kindle a fire. This was given as a warning to the devils that they were awake and ready to fight them if necessary. When the Indians go camping far back into the mountains, and even if a white man accompanies them, they always insist on making the first campfire when a camping place is selected. In building the fire, the first stick of wood they lay down points directly north and south. On the north end of this stick of wood, they place another stick some 8 or 12 inches back from the north end, placing this branch east and west, thus making a cross. When the cross is made, they proceed to kindle the fire, and during the whole time they offer up a prayer to God in a low tone of voice. This prayer is earnestly offered up to the Almighty, asking Him to protect them from the Indian devils and wild animals while they are in the woods and to keep them safe from accidents. Cite Lucy Thompson, To the American Indian, Reminiscences of a Yurok Woman, 1991. Thompson's reference was to kidnappings in olden times, to quote her words. But what about today? Do the kidnappings still occur? What do the reservation police know about this that we don't? She also infers that the Sasquatch, or Indian devils as she calls them, were simply Indians gone wild from the loneliness of living remote from kinfolk. This isn't the first time I've heard that perception articulated in written work. Of great importance in her work was the mention of children born to the mixed Sasquatch and Indian couples. This too was ignored by the proponents of the ape theorem. I've heard stories from other Native Americans where whistling in the tribe by anyone, including children, was forbidden. The reasons for that stemmed from their belief that to hear a whistle from the forested areas meant the Sasquatch was on the prowl, and the children were admonished to run for their lodgings lest they be gathered up and taken away to locations unknown. Klamath women were encouraged not to whistle or stray far from encampments alone, but always in groups of women, some designated to be watchful over the children. It was important to be vigilant, always observant. The Klamath Indian of Northern California used the term ya 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 ash to mean the scary one or one who scares me. This term may be a sound-alike term mistranslated by white men of the Modoc Indian term Yayahas. At one time, the Modoc and the Klamath Indians were neighboring tribes. The Wenatchee and the Chowanito. The early Wenatchee Indians knew a hairy giant they referred to as Chowanito, translated to mean night people or night person. Isabel, a 100-year-old Indian woman, member of the Wenatchee tribe, gave the following report of an event which occurred during her great-grandfather's generation. In the fall of the year, October, a group of male members of the Wenatchee tribe were on a hunting trip near Wenatchee Lake. One of the men became separated from the rest of the party and was captured by Chowanito. He was taken to a cave far up in the Rocky Mountains and held captive by a family of Chowanitos through the winter until spring. The odor in the cave was terrible. They would not take him out hunting with them, but made him remain in camp near the cave with the women. They were like a different tribe of Indians. In the spring, they returned him to where they had captured him. Upon returning to his camp, he was immediately recognized by the children who couldn't believe that he was back as he had been gone for so long. They thought that he had been killed. He had been well treated by Chowanito. Ed Fuchs. According to the writings of C.P. Lyons and Milestones of the Mighty Fraser, the following instances are only two of the many, many abduction stories by hairy giants told by the First Nation Canadians and handed down through time via their oral history. An Indian woman living near Laidlaw, British Columbia, related this story in all seriousness. Over 100 years ago, roughly 1850, when the Indians were berry picking, one woman who had strayed from the others was suddenly confronted by a giant. Too paralyzed with fear to scream or run, she was quickly carried up the steep mountainside after a long climb during which time she remained in a semi-coma and so did not note the direction or length of time. She was carried through a rough door and into a rock cave. Two other Indian women were crouched in this cave, and when left alone with the new arrival, told her they had been captured in a similar manner years ago. They had been brought as wives for the giants and had since that time bore them children. The men would disappear for months at a time and then return with food. For the new woman, they brought flour and smoked fish that they knew she was accustomed to eating. C.P. Lyons. The fact that they mention the use of flour dates the story as taking place after the arrival of Hudson Bay traders in 1827 to 1840. Although the woman had been a captive for over a year and had borne a child, she was determined to escape. The other two women told her they would help, and when the hairy giants left on one of their seasonal hunting trips, she was told to prepare all the food she could. She made bread, or bannock, suggesting that these people, or the Indian women at least, used fire, and with a heavy pack of food set out across the mountains. After almost unendurable hardships, she became exhausted and was carried and helped along by the other two women who possessed the giant's strength in some measure. She was left in a stupor near where she had originally disappeared. The villagers saw her, but she suddenly became afraid of them and fled. She was pursued and carried to her father's house, where she fainted and remained under a spell. The Indians believed that the giants held some mental power over her, but with careful nursing she eventually recovered, or they had knowledge of unknown herb with medicinal properties. The second episode is still fresh in many of the Indians' memories. Several years ago, in the vicinity of Laidlaw, a hairy giant entered a house and caused a woman and her two children to flee in terror. Later, footprints approximately 20 inches long were found clearly imprinted in the mud along the route the woman had taken. Although she was not captured, she has since refused to live in the house. Hair caught in the door jamb was reported reddish in color. A 40-gallon barrel of salted fish had been picked up and dumped over, and the retreating footprints showed that the Sasquatch had merely stepped over the railroad fences and returned directly to the steep mountain slopes. Cite C.P. Lyons, The Hairy Giants of Laidlaw, Milestones on the Mighty Fraser. Toronto, J.M. Dent and Sons, 1950, page 28, through 30. To be continued, and thank you for listening. There will be many parts to the reading of this book. If you like this reading, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to be sure to catch the future parts. We welcome comments, but please be considerate of others. If you have had an experience with or about Bigfoot, cryptids, UFOs, paranormal, or any other strange happenings and would like to share them on our channel to be read, please email them to sharingofstrangestories@gmail.com. Our goal is to establish a channel that can provide an outlet for people to speak freely of their experiences without ridicule from others. There are many of us out there that have had these experiences and have felt that ridicule, but ridicule will not be welcome here. Emails will be read on our channel, so please keep them family friendly. If you want to remain anonymous and do not want your name read to the public, please put that at the beginning of the email or in the subject line. Thanks again for listening and stay safe.